Moving on from Group D for a second, fret not, we'll be back to it. It's time to welcome back the man that we may as well just call the co-host of the ASEAN game. It's Keesh Sundaresan. Keesh, how you doing?
Great to be back, Ryan. It's been a while. It really has been a while. There's been a lot of WhatsApp related stories for you, I assume, in the last couple of months.
Yeah, you might be referring to the fact that somebody took over my WhatsApp account and started calling people. That was great to deal with while on holiday in remote locations here in the north of Thailand. It was great. Loved all of that. Thank you for making that public knowledge as well. That's great. It's sorted now, though. It's fine. Got a Thai phone number. Everything's fine. We won't be giving that information to the general public, though, unless you want to put yours out there as well so people can just chat you when they see you at the games.
Definitely not, Ryan.
Just send you a quick one. Hey, turn around. Keesh, can you see me? Keesh. It'd be great. We'd love to have that. But let's keep it to football for the time being, where Malaysia are set to take on a very, very talented, but still very Jurgen Klinsmann-led South Korean side, Jordan and Bahrain, and what could be a pretty positive group for them. But before we get into the group itself, let's start with a bit of the bad news, which is what we're doing throughout this whole podcast. Are there some notable absences for Malaysia?
It's a really difficult one to sort of pinpoint, because in theory, Kim Pan-gon has quite literally picked a squad filled with the best players at his disposal. But there have been a couple of players that were a significant part of the journey over the last 3 to 4 years, the qualification process. I think the one that a lot of fans were slightly perhaps upset or confused about was Shafiq Ahmad, who's this hard-working striker who was left out of the team in place of now, because we've got a new naturalized Colombian striker, or a naturalized striker from Colombia, I should say, but now he's a Malaysian by the name of Romel Morales. So he's up there, hasn't played for Malaysia yet. This could be his first ever appearance. But Shafiq Ahmad misses out because of that. There's another guy by the name of Azam Azeh, who has also been a pretty decent figure in midfield. But understandably, he misses out because he's also had a topsy-turvy season with Pahang domestically. So there have been a number of these players that have been absent from the national team. For me personally, Shafiq Ahmad is the name that I was a little bit frustrated to not see. But having said that, to just sum it up, it's hard to argue because Kim Pan-gon has just gone and picked the best squad of players available at his disposal.
Yeah, and I think compared to the other groups, we started this one talking about Indonesia. There are some notable absences there, and there's some really notable absences for the other nations that we'll be talking about today. So off to a decent start for Malaysia there. And speaking of being off to a decent start, I do think that this is a group that they're going to be feeling pretty positive about. And who are some of the players that you think will be key for them to succeed in this group? Or, I feel like we just talk about Arif Aiman every time you and I are together, because why wouldn't we? But I think he's definitely a player that people are going to be looking out for, or if people don't know about him, he's definitely one. But who do you think are going to be the key players for Malaysia in this group?
Given that we're up against teams that have more than enough attacking capabilities. Jordan have got a player that plays in League R, in Montpellier, Musa Al-Tamari. The quality of attackers that Malaysia will be facing in this group means that it's hard to look past Dion Cools being an absolutely important player for Malaysia. Bear in mind that he's the only one in this team in the defensive setup who has had the experience of playing against the bigger boys of European football. He's played in the Champions League. He's played in some of the biggest leagues in Europe. He's competed with the bigger boys. And his experience will be very, 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 very important at the back. We've got a decent back line. Junior Elstal is great in the air. Sharul Saad is a really dependable defender. Matt Davies, Corbin Ong, they all form a very decent core of defenders for the Malaysian national team, all of whom have the experience of playing in the AFC Champions League and all that. But Dion Cools one step above. He's got an extra bit of experience and quality. So I mean, I know it's very easy to look at the likes of Faisal Halim and Arif Aiman and Darren Lock and your Romel Morales and all these guys and look at them as the absolute key players for Malaysia. But I think Dion has got a phenomenally big role to play at the Asian Cup.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially with Korea being in the group. There's a bit of attacking talent coming at them there. I mean, this could be
just a bit, yeah.
Just a touch. I mean, if you're not into defending Lee Kang-in, there's Sun Heung-min, and then Hong Hee-chan's doing relatively well these days. I think that's a really good shout to kind of put some eyes on the defense there, because if they're going to get out of this group, then I think those will be the key players, because you expect the attacking talent to be there. You expect them to do what they've been doing in AFC Cup and ACL in the league. And yeah, that is a lot of attacking talent there, and that will be the fun side of it. But I always love that you're there for the defenders, man. Love that you're there for it. And if they're able to perform, if the defense is able to hold up and do their job, and like I said, I think we expect a lot out of this attack, rightfully so. Do you think this is a group that they can challenge for top spot? Are they aiming for second? What are your expectations going into this group?
Yeah, so this is the part that's a bit confusing, Ryan, because the sentiment within Malaysia at the moment almost feels like we think we're good enough to get into the round of 16, and I'm trying not to get caught up too much in that optimism, because I also want to be realistic. I also don't want to put unnecessary players on a group of unnecessary pressure on a group of players that have taken Malaysia to the Asian Cup on merit for the first time in about 40 years. But having said that, having prefaced it with that cautious mentality, I understand why fans are optimistic, right? Because we have been playing well, and if you look at recent results against some of the bigger boys in the region, we held China to a draw. We've drawn twice with Syria now, the most recent one being just a few days back in a closed-door friendly game. We drew 2-2 with them in that match. And these are teams that are very closely ranked to the likes of Jordan and Bahrain. And even Bahrain, for that matter, under Kim Pan-gon. Last year, we played them in a qualifier match at the Bukit Jalil Stadium, and we only lost 2-1. And that was the game where most Malaysians would say that we deserve to win that game, judging by how we played on the day. So when you add all of this into a mix, and there is a real sense of optimism. And just a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure in Malaysia to do a sit-down chat with the president of FAM, Dato' Hamidin, and we talked at length about the Asian Cup expectations. And even he, a person who's the president, who's got to be smart about what he says, right? And even he comes out and says that they're hopeful of the team at least finishing third maybe in the group, being one of the third best teams to qualify to the round of 16. So as it speaks, domestically, there's a lot of optimism about Malaysia making it through to the round of 16. And by the way, Malaysia was supposed to play Saudi Arabia in a friendly game to prepare for the Asian Cup, and that match was cancelled. And according to the FAM president, it was because the Saudi Arabian FA head dropped him a message and say that, I'm really sorry, but Mancini thinks there's a chance we could play y'all in the round of 16, so he doesn't want to play y'all in the friendly game. That speaks volumes, right? So, again, cautiously optimistic at the moment.
Spoken like a true football fan. There's no other kind of, there's no blind optimism in this sport. Come on, man. Well, let's dip into the mailbag a little bit here. There were some that came in specifically for you. We'll start with one on X coming in from Mim, asking, with Kim Pan-gon opting for familiarity over quality, almost half the squad is lacking minutes at their club. Is match fitness going to be Malaysia's biggest weakness? A little harsh take there.
I don't know. I truly believe that players have got to be, consistently getting minutes for the national team in order to compete at the highest level, right? To compete for Malaysia, to compete at the highest level. I'm 100%. I'm a true believer in that. and I know where this is coming from, because some of the best players in the Malaysian national team are players from JDT who have not necessarily played a lot for their clubs, right? Like Shami Kuti, who by the way is one of my favorite players in Malaysian football, but he's just had a season filled with injuries and has not had a lot of games under his belt. But we're all hoping for him to be one of the key players in midfield if he starts. Then there's Nacho Insa, who's also had a really long season with injuries as well, as barely played. There's Akia Rashid, there's Safawi, both of whom don't get enough minutes at JDT at the moment. So I understand where they're coming from, but some of these JDT boys train in an environment that is incredibly intense, right? The training, they might not get the match minutes, but that training environment has to count for something. And I'm not even saying this out of the blue, right? Because Akia Rashid, who barely plays, who barely starts for JDT, but every time he plays for Malaysia, he seems to just have an impact. He might not be able to last the full 90, but even if he plays for the first 70, or even if he plays for the last 20, he always seems to have an impact. So it's hard to argue against them being included in the national team, because they train in a highly competitive, high octane environment on a daily basis. And at this point, based on evidence that we've seen, I'm inclined to believe that counts for something.
Yeah, like you say, hopefully that's at least keeping the match fitness up, that they're training at that high intensity. And well, I mean, that's also what these closed door friendlies are about. So maybe they got something there that Kim Pangon was seeing that'll work for them. But I mean, and also, familiarity, I think, does carry a bit of weight. So we'll see. We'll move on to one from Irving Tan here, also on X, Twitter. One characteristic of the AFC is the massive drop-off in quality the further down we go in the rankings, with 4 teams qualifying, technically 5, but again, we're excluding Australia this time. I know we included them before, but we'll exclude them for this one. So technically 5 from the region. He's asking, has ASEAN succeeded in closing the gap with what we might call the Tier 1, the mainstays, and Tier 2?
I don't think we've closed the gap. I think it's being closed. I think the process, it's an ongoing process. We've seen Vietnam in recent years put up a really strong fight against some of the bigger boys in Asian football. We've seen Thailand do it every now and then as well. But the problem has been, making sure that the growth is a sustainable growth, making sure that the growth is a continuous growth. Because every time we think Thailand, for example, are taking 3 steps forward, they then go on to take 1 or 2 steps backwards. And as a result, you saw the recent friendly against Japan where they got completely smashed in the second half. Although, I will preface it by saying they didn't have their best players. It wasn't the best squad. It was a new manager, yada, 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 all that. But it's still not a good look, right? Indonesia has been, playing a number of teams in preparation for the Asian Cup. And their results have not exactly been super positive either. There've been some encouraging minor defeat. I think they lost 2-1 to Libya, but there've been some bigger defeats. They got smashed in Iraq a couple of months ago, for example. So I don't think the gap has been closed. I know Malaysian fans are very optimistic, but I also, we've seen the script long enough to know that, this is a great couple of years. But we can only conclusively say that the gap has been closed if 4 years down the line, when we've seen the actual process that has gone through the years. But what I will say is, with the increase in quality of the domestic clubs in Southeast Asia, your JDTs, your Burirams, these clubs, their increased competitiveness in the Asian Champions League or the AFC Cup has had an effect on the national team as well, and hopefully the gap continues to be closed in the next few years.
Bringing it back to the club side, this is why we love the chats. Top man. We'll get you out of here with one that will stick to the national team side. This is coming in from Diliamin, and he's asking which of the Southeast Asian teams will go the furthest in this tournament. So which side's going to?
Oh, this is tricky. I mean, on any given day, I would usually just go with Thailand, but I don't think that's going to happen in this tournament. I just read Tah's tweet earlier today about the fact that no television company in Thailand has been able to acquire broadcasting rights, and that just made me go, wow, I don't think anyone in Thailand expects anything from the national team. So I'm gonna put Thailand out of the mix for the moment. And then there's Indonesia, who are in a really, really, really difficult group. I mean, having Japan, it's hard to see Indonesia accomplishing anything at the Asian Cup. I'm rooting for them. Don't get me wrong. I'm really, really rooting for them. I'm going to sound like a biased person, but I will say that right now, it's to a large extent, it does feel like Malaysia stand the best chance of making it furthest. Only because they are in a group where, bar South Korea, I think a lot of fans feel like Jordan and maybe Bahrain, Malaysia can put up a challenge against them and try and cause an upset against them. Don't get me wrong, they will still be underdogs against these two teams, but at the very least, you can try and pull off an upset there.
It's not Iraq and Japan, for example, that you're having to go against there. Yeah, I think on paper it definitely looks that way. But either way, we will be back. We'll try to have a chat after the group stage when all 4 teams make it through, because we know that it's going to be Indonesia and Vietnam topping their group.
That would be the absolute dream.
I actually really can't even imagine that. I don't see any way that Indonesia and Vietnam both get through. That's Malaysia, sure. Thailand, maybe. But either way, we'll come back. We'll have a chat about it after the group stage, and we'll look ahead to Malaysia making their long run to the final. It's going to happen. It's going to be great. And we'll celebrate then. But for now, Keesh, as always, thanks so much for taking the time.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me on.